Agenda for this session, we're going to first of all just get an introduction to iOS and Android. iOS is the operating system that runs on iPhones, iPads, iPad minis, iPod Touch. They're all running iOS. So any Apple iDevice is pretty much going to be iOS, is the system that it's running. Android devices are run on a lot of different phones, like the Samsungs that are really popular right now, the Motorola Droid stuff that they've got out there, the Kindle Fire is an Android device, the Google Nexus 7 is an Android device. So as far as the mobile world is concerned, right now it's kind of like a big battle royale between Apple's iOS devices and Android devices. Now there's a couple other mobile OSs that exist out there, like BlackBerry, which was huge for a while, but it has really taken a beating lately. BlackBerry seems to be on its way out. There's also Windows mobile devices, so the Windows 7 and the Windows 8 mobile devices, the new Windows tablets and things like that. But again, Windows was a little late to the market, so they're not really quite making the impact that iOS and Android devices are. So as of right now, it seems like iOS and Android, one of those, if not both, are going to be the mobile operating systems in the foreseeable future. So that is where we're going to focus, right? So we'll talk a little bit about this battle royale that's going on, and then we'll go in and talk about some of the classes that we teach. We have a class called Creating iOS Applications, where you can come and learn how to make Apple iPhone apps or iPad apps. So we have a class that teaches people how to do that. We also have a class for Android development. We call it the Android Development Bootcamp. Both of these are 1 week long classes. So it's essentially 9 to 5 class, 5 days for 1 week of total training. And we cover the same amount in a single week class that you would get an entire semester of like a college level course. So if you're going to take one of these at a college somewhere, it would be maybe on Tuesdays and Thursdays for an hour each day for an entire semester. And if you count up the hours that you're getting there, it's basically you're covering a college level course in about a week. So granted, as far as homework is concerned, New Horizons doesn't usually assign a ton of homework. We try to limit everything to the in-class stuff. So we try to get all of your instruction and hands-on labs done in that class time. And we do a lot of hands-on labs. That's really the best way to learn this stuff. And then finally, any questions we'll hit at the end. If you have questions that I didn't notice during class or anything like that, just let me know. So as of right now, I think we are good. All right. Very nice. So let's go ahead and take a look at our intro. As I mentioned, iOS is the operating system that runs on our Apple devices. So the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod Touch, they're all running iOS. Now as far as the devices, any other devices run this operating system? The answer is no. It is exclusively Apple products. They do not let other companies use their operating system to create devices. So if you have an iPad or an iPhone, guess who made that? Apple. There are no other companies that make that. So if you go to Verizon and you get an iPhone, Verizon didn't make it. Verizon is providing the service, right? But it was created by Apple. Android, on the other hand, Android is an open source operating system, which means anyone can use it. It's open to anyone. So if you wanted to start a company and create tablets, let's say you have this cool idea for tablets that are, cylindrical. And so you decide to start a company to make these cylindrical devices, and you need an operating system for it. Guess what? You're not going to be able to run iOS on it, but you could run Android on it. So now you make your cylindrical hardware devices, you install the Android operating system on it. Just like HP or Dell, they make computers, but they're running Microsoft's operating system, generally speaking. So now if you're going to make this cylindrical mobile device, you're going to need an operating system to run on it. Android is open source, so you could use that. And that's can be a good thing and a bad thing for Android, because you can get a lot of really high quality devices. Like I said, the newest Samsung devices are really spectacular. The Kindle HD stuff, those Kindle Fire devices are really good devices. Google just yesterday announced their most recent Google Nexus device, and it's really on par with the Apple iPad, but it is like half the price. So there's some really good devices being made by Android, but because it is open to anyone, there's a lot of junky devices that are running Android as well. So you could go to Kmart right now, probably buy an Android tablet for $100. Guess what? It's probably not going to be as high quality as an iPad, but the iPad's, $500. So you kind of get what you pay for it in some respects. But the Android devices really, I think, in the future, that might be to their advantage. If the past is any indication, I don't know if you remember VHS tapes. Do you remember those? If you go back even further, they had a tape system called Betamax. And Betamax was really a more high-quality way of doing VCR tapes. The problem was Sony didn't open it up for everyone. You had to kind of go through Sony if you wanted to do Betamax, but VHS was open to everyone, and so in the end, the VHS won that kind of battle. Nobody did Betamax after a while because VHS was open to everyone. Now, with that being said, that might give Android an advantage having all these devices, but it can also be a disadvantage because with Android devices, there's a lot of junk out there, so people might say, yeah, I don't want Android, it doesn't work very well. When you get an iOS device, you're getting a really high-quality piece of hardware running it. You can't get a piece of junk iPhone or a piece of junk iPad because Apple won't make them. Apple just makes good products, really. So the Android, it could be a benefit, could be a detriment. But at any rate, these are like the two major mobile operating systems that are really leading the pack right now. So every month, people are downloading apps on these devices to the rate of 1 billion app downloads each month on each device. So iOS, the Apple iTunes App Store, 1 billion downloads a month. On the Android device, most of those are coming through the Google Play App Store, about 1 billion downloads a month. So they're kind of neck and neck right now, and there is a lot of downloads happening. So now you say, wait a minute, how can I become part of that action? Now those downloads are happening every month. If you have a cool idea for an app, or even if it's not something that the app itself is going to make money, like my bank that I use has an app, and I can actually deposit checks by taking a picture of the front and back of the check and deposit it. I don't even have to drive to the bank. That is cool. So they give their app away to help their customers so that their customers don't leave and go to other banks, so they can attract new customers. So even if you have an existing company and you're not planning on selling an app, you can create an app that adds value to your company. And if you don't have an app, then people might go to another competitor that does have an app that does cool things for them. So, I mean, even if you're not going to make money directly by app sales, having an app is really a way to drive business and help anything you want to work with. So tablets are projected to outsell laptops this year. And by the way, laptops outsell desktops right now, but now tablets are slated, as far as all the current trends, tablets are going to be outselling laptops before the end of this year. And now if you combine laptops and desktops, they're still going to be outselling tablet devices, but if current trends continue, in the next couple years, tablet devices will be the major computing device that people have. And so it's really inevitable that it's going that direction. So if we want to look at some actual statistics, as far as smartphone sales is concerned, iOS devices, about 43% of the smartphone sales, Android devices about 51%. And again, Android kind of has the advantage because you have, hundreds of companies building Android devices. with iOS, it's one company, it's Apple. So the fact that one company has 43% and all the other companies doing Android are still beating it, but for the number of companies making Android devices, Apple is really doing well. Now, as far as tablets, I do informal surveys sometimes. So whenever I travel and I'm at the airport, I look around and see what devices people are using. Since I code for both, I make iOS apps and Android apps. Since I make both, I want to keep an eye on the trends. And as far as tablets are concerned, the iPad is by far the tablet I see the most. Now, I love Android. I have an Android tablet that I love, and I use it more than my iPad. But out there in the real world, there's, as far as tablet devices. Now, as far as phones are concerned, it's a little bit more neck and neck. But tablet devices, and now that Kindle Fire and Google Nexus are gaining steam a little bit, it might get a little closer, but it's a pretty close battle. Now, these other smartphones, these are just phones that we're talking about here. As far as other smartphones, that would be like the Windows phones or the BlackBerry phones, or non-smartphones. There are still people out there that just have a normal cell phone that doesn't connect to the web and do all this cool stuff that smartphones do. So as far as smartphone shipments, again, the shipments, Android has a significant lead, but simply because it has so many companies producing phones running that OS. iOS is just one company. And then other phones, once again. So this is shipments versus sales. I don't know exactly. It's a different survey company that did these surveys, so you kind of got to take some of these numbers with a grain of salt. Now, tablet shipments, like I said, the iPhone, the iPad, that's what I see most at the airport, way more than Kindle Fire, Nexus Chrome, Asus, Toshiba, Samsung makes tablet devices. There's all these companies that make tablets that run Android, but iOS has still got the lead in the tablet department because the iPad has just been so successful. So if you're thinking of getting a tablet device, chances are the iPad was probably the first one you looked into. Maybe not. Maybe if you go to Amazon, you see the Kindle Fire popping up on your screen all the time. Maybe that's the first thing you looked at. Or maybe if your cell company has a sale, a special on the Galaxy tablet or something, maybe you looked at Android first. But iOS, the iPad is really way in the lead right now. Now, as far as how many apps are available, that's one of the reasons people don't get Windows phones as much, right, is because, hey, I know that Netflix, my bank, my grocery store, Lowe's, department stores, I know that if I have an iOS device or an Android device that there's an app for it. Now, if I get a Windows 7 device or a BlackBerry device, guess what? I know Netflix is probably there, but maybe not. On BlackBerry, I don't even know if Netflix has a BlackBerry app. I would think they do, but I don't know. I know that like the Lowe's grocery store, they have iPhone and Android version of their app. I know the bank has iPhone and Android version, but the other devices are lagging behind. So there's 800,000 different apps available in each app store. So iOS has essentially their iPhone App Store, iTunes App Store. Android has Google Play App Store. They have 800,000 apps available. So if you're thinking, oh, I really wish I had an app for tracking the apple growth on my apple tree, guess what? Or, maybe I shouldn't have done an apple tree. But at any rate, if I have a garden that I want to manage, there are apps to help you manage your garden. If you're a cook, there are apps with recipes. If you want to, find the lowest cost medicine anywhere in town or the lowest cost gasoline prices, there's going to be apps for that. There's apps for everything. When you have 800,000 apps available, there's pretty much an app for everything you can imagine. So as far as that's concerned, they're neck and neck as far as number of apps. Now, as far as app downloads, again, Android has more companies producing Android devices, so they get a little larger share of the app downloads over iOS. But as far as making money, if you want to sell an app, Android apps are free a lot more often than iOS apps. iOS apps have a lot more low-cost dollar apps, paid apps, and people who buy Apple devices are used to spending a little bit more to get that. So as we start looking at app downloads, even though Android has the lead as far as numbers of downloads, as far as making money off those downloads, the revenue is way out of whack. The iOS devices make a lot more money than the Android devices. So for example, if you've ever heard of Angry Birds, that's a little app where you fling birds at pigs. And for whatever reason, it's a huge hit. It's fun. That's one reason. It's cute. But it, is a huge hit. Now, they make an Android version and an iOS version of Angry Birds. Guess where they're making most of their money? The iOS side of the house. Why? Because people who have iOS devices are patched into their iTunes store where they've already got money waiting for them to spend, and the infrastructure is a little easier to spend money there, and people are used to spending money there. Whereas the Android, the whole point of Android is it's open source, free for anyone to use. So now the concept of getting free stuff is a little bit more ingrained into the culture there, whereas the Apple side of the house, paying for stuff, you pay more for an iPad than you do for most any Android tablet. So the fact that you're paying more to get the device means that you're probably willing to pay more for the stuff on it too. So if you want to make money, if you want to learn to code apps and your goal is to make a lot of money, you might want to look at the iOS class. In the long run, you might want to do both, but if you're just trying to create your own app and make some money, iOS is making more money than Android. But still, I'll tell you, it's hard because when you're competing with 800,000 apps, to make money by coding mobile apps can be challenging. It's like if you wanted to make money being a musician. You can write awesome songs, you can make wonderful music, but you know what? There's tens of thousands of songs that have been written, and how many get played on the radio? 5. So there's all these other songs that are being written, but very few actually end up being the huge hit making millions of dollars. Now, that's not to say you couldn't make a nice, steady income if you develop a few apps. You could, I have some apps that I wrote a couple years ago that I haven't even maintained, and I still make a little tiny bit of income every month off of those apps. Not enough to quit my day job, which is okay. I love my day job, but if you want to make $1 million, there's a lot of competition out there. All right, so now you're asking, okay, what do? I want to do it. I want to jump on board this because everything is going towards these OSs right now, so I want to be on as early as possible, right? Now, honestly, if you had learned to code iPhone apps 3 years ago, 2 years ago, it was almost a sure thing you're going to make good money because there wasn't quite as much competition and people were always paying for things. Now that Android is so popular with all the free apps they have, there's a lot more free iPhone apps nowadays than there ever was before Android came around. You used to have to pay for everything on iOS. So there's a lot of free stuff on the iPhone now simply because people got used to that on the Android side of the house, right? So at any rate, if you want to learn to program for the iPhone and the iPad, then we have a class for that, creating iOS applications. Now, as far as the class is concerned, this is general information about coding for iOS. So if you want to make iPad and iPhone apps, you must own a Mac. Now, you do not have to own a Mac to take the class. For the class, New Horizons will provide systems for you. So if you don't own a Mac, you can still take the class because we have Macs that we let you remote into and you do all your labs on our machines, on our Macs. But now when you go home and you want to code your own stuff, you're going to have a Mac. So if you go home and all you have are Windows computers at home, you're going to have to go buy yourself a Mac. And that's going to run you a couple grand. So it's a little bit of a price point that you might think, okay, iOS I can make more money, but I have to spend a couple grand to even get into it. I already have a Windows computer. I already have, other OS computer. With Android, it's not stuck in the Mac OS. But with iOS, there's really no good way to program iOS apps without owning a Mac. There are some ways to kind of do it, but there's no there's no substitute for owning a Mac. So all of the programming tools, all the software for programming is free once you own the Mac. Now I should say, if you have a recent enough Mac, if you have a Mac that's like 5 years old, you might have to join their developer club so that you can get the downloadable tools. But for the most part, if you have a recent enough Mac, all the tools are free. You can download everything you need for free. You don't have to pay extra. So once you have a Mac, you download all of the software and the software developer kits that you need, and then you can start creating iOS apps. Now, all of the labs we run in our class will run on an iPhone simulator. So to perform this class, you don't even need to own an iPhone. So you can write Apple, or you can write iPhone and iPad apps without ever owning an iPhone or an iPad if you want to. You can run everything in a little simulator. So basically, all these free tools that you download have an iPhone simulator that pops up on your screen, and you've got this little iPhone on your screen that you can work with. And so in our class, all of our labs are designed to run on the iPhone simulator. So you don't need to own an iPhone. You don't need to own a Mac to take the class. But eventually, if you actually want to deploy your apps to Apple's iTunes Store, you must own a Mac, you must own an iPhone or an iPad, because you have to test it on a hardware device before they will even allow you to upload it to possibly get it available on their iTunes Store. All right? So you don't have to have this for class, but if you eventually want to release your apps to the world, you have to pay $99 a year to get a developer account with Apple. And once you have a developer account, and you have a Mac, and you have an iPhone, you've tested your software, then you can submit your app to their iTunes Store, and they actually have human beings that check your app and make sure it's not messed up, make sure it's a good, high-quality app, and then if it's good, they will approve it, and you'll have your app out there for other people to start downloading. If it's not so good, if it's missing something, or if it's not up to their standards, those people will send you a message saying, okay, you need to do this and this with your app before we allow it on our iTunes Store. All right, now as far as taking the class, can anyone just jump right in and start doing this? Well, not exactly. You need to already have some programming experience coming into this. Before you can take this class, you need to know a little bit about programming. So you might say, well, if I have somebody, or I want to take this class, but I don't have any programming experience, what you should do is just sign up for any programming class, basically, that New Horizons offers, and then pretty much any programming class. So down here I have some examples. So the language that you use to code iPhone apps is called Objective-C, and it is only really used in the Mac world. So Objective-C, there are some Objective-C classes out there, but there's not a lot of demand for it. So for the most part, we don't offer that very often. But we do offer Java classes all the time. We do offer C# classes, so Microsoft .NET classes. So if you take a .NET programming class, that's like the Microsoft world. Or if you take a Java programming class, that's kind of like a language that is supposed to be universal. Right? So if you take any kind of programming class, then you have the potential of jumping into the iOS after that. So any student taking programming is a potential iOS student, because once they know a little bit about object-oriented programming, then you're ready. You can jump into this class. And we'll teach you a little bit of Objective-C in this class, and then we'll go in, we'll actually build an app. The class right now is designed to build a complete app from beginning to end and learn how to do it along the way. So it's really a fun class, and you'll be able to, by the end of this class, you will be ready and capable of creating an app and getting it out there for people to start downloading. Now, this is a beginning level class, so we're not going to learn to do like 3D graphic games and physics-based calculations like Angry Birds or anything like that. But if you have like a data-driven app idea, so maybe you want to make an app that helps people track their movie collection or something like that, you will be ready. You'll have all the tools you'll need to actually go in and do that. If you want to take it further, we currently don't offer like a level 2 class, simply because if you really wanted to do 3D apps or some of the more intense stuff, our students would be required probably to have a device, and there hasn't been a ton of demand for it, but there's definitely a lot of room to grow after this class. So it's a beginner level class that gives you plenty of room to grow afterwards. All right, the Android development, just to give you the general lowdown on Android development, one of the cool things about Android development is that you can do it on a Windows, on a Mac, or on a Linux machine. So basically any major desktop operating system you can use to develop Android apps. So you don't have to go buy a new computer. Whatever computer you have right now, you can develop Android apps on it. So all of the tools are free for all platforms. So everything you need to develop Android apps you can download on the Mac for free, you can download on a Linux box for free, you can download on a Windows machine for free. So in our class we actually have lab machines that you can log in and use, or if you'd like to just download all the tools on your own computer, you could use your own computer to do all the exercises. Now we don't ask you to even buy an Android device, so all the labs in class run on the Android simulator, very similar to the iPhone simulator. Basically, you pop up a little program on your Windows machine, and it's a little simulation of an Android device. And we can run our apps all on that simulator. And in fact, the first Android app I ever released for downloads, I never even tested it on a real Android device. So I deployed and released an Android app before I ever owned an Android device. I did all my testing on the Android simulator. So at any rate, if you really want to get your app out there, you should probably test it on a real device. But the Android App Store doesn't require that. It's a little cheaper entry point, right? So with iOS, you had to make sure you had a Mac, which could get expensive. You had to make sure you have an iPhone or an iPad, which could be expensive. And then you have to pay $99 per year to be able to get in and start publishing apps to the world. With Android development, $25 total investment. If you already have a computer, $25 total. That's a one-time fee, and then you'll have a developer account so that you can publish apps and people can start downloading it. Now again, you do not need any kind of developer account to participate in class. So there's no developer account built into class. You don't have to pay for it to take the class, because in class everything we can do on the simulators. And we don't actually release anything we build in class. But if eventually you build something you want to release it to the world, then you'll have to jump in and get a developer account. So as far as Android development, again, class prerequisites, any object-oriented programming experience is good enough. So you don't have to be an expert, but you should already know about object-oriented programming. So if that is a new term to you, object-oriented programming, go Google it, read the Wikipedia article on it, or better yet, come take a class. Now in the end, the language that Android apps are coded in is Java. So if you're going to take the Android Development Bootcamp class, you should probably take either Java Fundamentals or Java Programming. One or the other. You don't have to take both, because Java Fundamentals is kind of like a class for people with no programming background. Java Programming is a class for people who already know another coding language. They just need to learn Java. So there's actually quite a bit of overlap. You don't need to take them both, just one or the other, and then you'll be ready for the bootcamp, the Android Development Bootcamp. Now, if you didn't take Java, it's okay. You can take C# or any other language as long as it's an object-oriented programming language. So the major programming languages these days are C-based languages like C#, C++, Objective-C, Java. Those are the two biggies. But there's other languages out there that exist, and if you know what variables are, and you know how to do if statements, and you know how to do looping statements like for loops or while loops, if you understood all the stuff I just told you, you could probably jump right into Android development or jump into the iOS class. You're ready to go. So again, any student taking a programming class or with some programming background is a potential Android student. You can jump right in. So, and I'm telling you, in the next couple years, everything is going this direction. So if you are a programmer and you haven't started going this direction yet, it's a good idea to start thinking in this direction, right? If you're not a programmer and you want to become a programmer, where do you start? Android or iPhone programming is a great place to start because it seems like everything is going this direction. So there are some links to the classes, and I don't think you can actually click these links through your interface. But basically, if you go to newhorizons.com and do a search for iOS 5 applications or do a search for Android Development Bootcamp, you'll find the same thing. Right? I went to the New Horizons Connecticut site, and that's where I found it because Connecticut is my home office. Right? Now, those are the only classes that you'll find already on the schedule. So if you want to take like Android Level 2 or iOS Development Level 2, advanced classes can be added if the demand grows for it. Right now, we don't have enough demand to justify creating a class for it. But you know what, I take that back. We actually do have an Android Level 2 class, but it hasn't been taught in quite a while. So it would be something that, if the demand adds for it, then we can add the class. So whatever your interest is, if you think, okay, well, I already know how to do the basics, I really need to know how to do some more advanced stuff. Well, some of the advanced stuff may require mobile devices because the simulators cannot simulate certain things. So if you want to take a class where you learn to use Bluetooth, the simulator doesn't do that. Or if you want to take a class where you can work with the motion detection on a device, the simulator doesn't really have the hardware to do motion detection, so it can't simulate certain things. But so if you want to take an advanced class, then we can add it. But we may ask you to buy a device, or the last advanced class we taught for the Android, we actually bundled a device into the class. But of course, you end up paying more for the class if you get the device bundled in. So it's, it's kind of how it works. All right. So, hang on. Let me open it up for questions. Again, if you have any questions, you can post it in the question area or into the chat window. And I'll show you real quick the links. If I just go to google.com, for example, or what am I saying, newhorizons.com. If I go to any New Horizons website, I can do a search for these classes, Android Bootcamp, for example. If I find a course and do a search for Android Bootcamp, now this is the worldwide New Horizons site, so it might have, go to your local site. It's going to work better. So if we go to NHCon, for example, that's the New Horizons Connecticut site. That'll be a little bit better if you go to your local site. If you're New Horizons New York or New Horizons whatever, go to your local New Horizons site, and then in this little search box here, do a search for Android. It'll be a little easier. It should point you straight to some Android courses. And there we go. There's the Android Development Bootcamp. And it'll tell you when it's on the schedule. And now it has locations for these, but these classes are all, anytime you see OLL, Online Live, that means you could take this class from anywhere. I've taught people who are everywhere from the West Coast to Germany in these online live classes. So if you are in Belize, I've had a student from Belize recently who attended a class. So as long as you have internet access, you can take these classes from any location. You don't have to be in Hartford or Fairfield. So if you see OLL, it doesn't matter if you went to the New Horizons New York or the New Horizons Connecticut. Basically, you can take these classes online. So anything that's OLL is available anywhere. And here we have, we can get info on it. We can add it to the cart. We can get an outline for the class. So if you want to see more specifically exactly what we cover, here's the outline of the topics we cover. And also I could do a search for iOS. And with any luck, doing a search for iOS will tell me, oh, here's creating iOS 5 applications. That's it. That's the class. And again, we can see that they're all OLL, which means I can attend the class from anywhere. And you get a live instructor. It's just like being in a classroom, except your instructor talks to you through the computer. You raise your hand by clicking a button instead of actually raising your hand. You still do all the same labs. The instructor is still there. They can come look over your shoulder and see how you're doing. If you have a problem and you want their help solving it, they can come and work with you. So it's very, very similar to a live classroom class, just the classroom is the internet. It's kind of cool. And again, if you click the outline, you can find out everything that we cover in class. And if there are no questions, I'll just encourage you to catch the wave. The future is now. Things are really headed this way. And if you can learn to become an iPhone developer or an Android developer, there's a lot of things going on in that world. If you're looking to upgrade your career or if you're looking to start your own business, either way, having these skills can be a super helpful thing. So I'll open it up to questions. And otherwise, I'll just tell everyone thank you for attending the webinar. And that's all I got for you. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Any lingering questions, bring them on. I'm happy to answer questions. Otherwise, feel free to log on out whenever you're ready. And appreciate your attendance. Happy coding.